The national championship is set. I've got my friend William here to talk about and recap the college football playoffs. A little bit later on, we have CBS Sports Zone, Shehan Jeyarajah. Just make sure to stick around for that. Welcome to the Walk on Redshirts. If you're not doing so already, make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Go follow us on social media. We've only got 1 week left of college football, as sad as that is. We've got one game left. We've only got one game left.
We got the Senior Bowl coming too.
Yeah, Senior Bowl, Hula Bowl, whatever all the other bowls that they have. Yeah, East-West Shrine Game. They've got all those Senior Bowls that they've got to do. Draft can be kind of fun. Combine, we get to see the Underwear Olympics. But we've got the national championship next week. Notre Dame is going to face off against Ohio State in this game. Like I said, stick around for a little bit later. Shehan Jeyarajah joins us. But first, what everybody really wants to hear about is William's thoughts on Clemson hiring a defensive coordinator.
You know, I don't know if anybody has heard of Penn State. Have you heard of Tom? Is that how you pronounce Tom Allen?
I believe he goes by Tommy.
Tommy boy. Listen, slam dunk hire. One of the craziest things that I saw, and when I was going over this, the last 5 hires, I think it was 5, that Dabo has made have either come from a Power 4 program or come from the NFL. And 4 of the 5, it is 6, I think. So 5 of the 6 have come off of a playoff team. So you got Matt Luke, who had retired for a year, but was coming off of the national championship with Georgia. You had Garrett Riley, who had just lost the national championship with TCU as offensive coordinator. You have Chris Rump coming from the Minnesota Vikings, so coming out of the NFL to come help out. Nick Eason, who's the odd duck, who came from Auburn, so not a national championship program, but a Power 4 SEC program.
From a national championship program.
They might be the Penn State of the SEC, except they've actually won some stuff recently. And then now you got Tom Allen coming out of Penn State off of a semifinal. So Dabo's in his bag, and you know someone made the comment.
Tom Allen got a bag too.
He did get a bag.
$2 million,
$6 million over 3 years, $1.9 million in the first year, 2.1 in the last. So you can assume that the middle year is 2 years. And Clemson paid his buyout of $900,000 to Penn State. Phenomenal hire, phenomenal guy, fits the culture of Clemson. I mean, he's a guy of faith, obviously, which aligns with what Dabo wants. But the thing that he does that I think separated him from other people is he really commands the room, and players love him. I saw a player interview where they were saying what was the difference between Manny Diaz and Tom Allen, and the player said Manny Diaz makes you want to run through a brick wall. Tom Allen tells you why you're running through the brick wall. And that's what Clemson needs. We have so much talent in that room. Now we just need somebody to hone it and then get them all going in the same direction. So very excited to see about this. You know, all the fans and people who are outside of Clemson think that everybody was looking down or pushing their nose up at Dabo. Apparently not, because you can pull somebody from Happy Valley to come do the same exact job in Clemson. So cannot wait to see what he does with this program.
Yeah, I think it's a good hire. I mean, Tom Allen, you know, at Indiana, he had some pretty good defenses. Obviously, this year at Penn State, loaded with talent. I put this out today. Clemson had 4 freshmen All-American, 2 on the defensive side of the ball. Sammy Brown is going to be an absolute beast at linebacker. I remember when he was coming out of high school, they were showing all of, you know, the things he would do. Just a good old farm boy. And when you get that farm boy strength,
that's different, baby.
That's who you want at linebacker and defensive end. You want those farm boys on the defensive line, the offensive line, linebacker.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's like secret power in mullet strength. This is why Quinn Ewers didn't win, because if he had the mullet, he would have won. He would be a national champion by now.
Listen, Chad Morris, the offensive coordinator my freshman year at Clemson, used to tell us, when I'm recruiting offensive linemen, I want to see that they have the biggest damn truck in the parking lot. I want to see that thing jacked up. They're country strong. They're redneck. I want to see a big old truck. And you are spot on, Jake. That's what people look for. Sammy Brown's a freaking beast. Can't wait to see what Tom Allen does with him. I'm curious to see what he does with Jeremiah Alexander coming over from Alabama. A lot of untapped talent there. He hasn't done much statistically, but obviously he was highly enough rated to be a 5-star and go to Alabama. And then you got I'm curious to see what he does with the safety. So he's got the Husky and the Bull position he likes to do, which the Bull is the defensive end linebacker hybrid, which I'm assuming would be a Jeremiah Alexander fit. And then you have the Husky position, which is a safety linebacker hybrid. I think Tony Rojas was that guy for the safety to linebacker. No, excuse me. Tony Rojas was defensive end linebacker. And then I think Zakee Wheatley might have been the safety to the linebacker, if I remember correctly, for Penn State. But curious to see who he uses on Clemson. But nobody wants to hear that much about Clemson right now. Everybody wants to talk about the semifinals. I could go on forever about Tom Allen.
Well, the one other thing before we get in the semifinals, I want to talk about this real quick. Carson Beck decides he's not going to the NFL, decides he wants to get absolutely paid at Miami.
Oh, God.
What are your thoughts on Carson Beck coming back to college and going to Miami?
So I was very open and honest about this coming into the year. Everybody gave me a hard time. I don't think Carson Beck is a great quarterback. Don't think he's a great quarterback at all.
I think his stock was in free fall. He wouldn't be able to even throw at the combine or in pro days.
Right.
So nobody's going to be able to draft him. Nobody's going to draft him high if you can't watch him throw.
Right. And he just had Tommy John. Now he has spurts. He has spurts where he looks great, but he's not consistent. Miami, you better have a defense. This ain't Cam Ward. So you might have spent $4 million to go 8-4, 7-5. I'm not big on this. I think Miami just made a huge mistake. Hats off to him. You get to live with your girlfriend. You get to have $4 million sitting in the bank. You're in Miami, coming off the Tommy John surgery, so you're gonna be chilling until after spring. Hats off to him.
I don't think it's a bad move. I think the ACC will do fine for him. I haven't looked at their schedule. I do think that they open with somebody difficult, though. Like, I feel like it's Alabama or something.
Jake, they couldn't win the ACC with Cam Ward.
They'll have a better defense. They went and hired Minnesota's defensive coordinator, I'm pretty sure, who should be – never mind. They open against Notre Dame. Never mind. That'll be a very interesting game because Notre Dame's going to lose a lot of guys, especially at quarterback, so they have no idea who their quarterback's going to be.
Yeah.
I don't hate Carson Beck to Miami. I think the style of play is going to help his draft stock. I think who they're playing is going to help his draft stock. In the ACC next year, they have Florida State, which we have no idea what they are. Literally no idea what they're going to look like. Louisville, who will be a decent opponent. NC State, who's usually decent. Stanford, who sucks. Syracuse, which, again, we don't really know because Kyle McCord is not coming back. Pitt should be at least a decent program. SMU should be pretty good. Virginia Tech should be a 7 to 8 win team next year. So, I mean, there's decent teams, but, like, there's no reason that they can't win 9 games. And if Carson Beck can play and they have any bit of a defense, you push 10 wins.
Yeah, now, if I want to remove my Carson Beck hater blockers, his receivers did lead the country in drop passes.
They had 39 drops this year.
So
like, holy crap, Georgia, go get some receivers that can catch the ball. Go get on the jugs machine because 39 drops at Georgia is ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
they should be firing their receiver coach. You can't justify your receivers dropping that many passes. Them and Penn State just need to blow up their receiver rooms. Just absolutely blow them. Start over. Penn State has 2 guys enter the portal. Omari Evans and Harrison Wallace both entered the portal. Let's get into it. Penn State receivers have 0 catches against Notre Dame.
That's not even the craziest
0 catches.
So Landon Tingwell, who does a really good job over at Penn State, former offensive lineman, covers the sport. He did a study over the last 4 years. Jake, over the last 4 years, their completions have gone down.
I saw that.
10%. So from 240 to 220, I believe it was. Their completions to wide receivers has gone down 50% from 206 to 102. What the heck? This is in a 4-year span. In a 4-year span, they have gone from completing 200 some odd passes to receivers to 100 passes to receivers. And to put that in perspective, Antonio Williams for Clemson, I believe, had 80 catches. So he would have been 80% of their offense. So that is mind-boggling when you have a program like Penn State. You have a guy like Drew Aller, who's a big-time quarterback. He's a 5-star guy coming out of high school, and you can only complete 100 passes to your receivers. Antonio Williams had 75 catches this year. So that's 75%. He amassed 75% of the receptions of what Penn State's entire receiving core did. That's not including tight ends or running backs. But
I will say their running backs are talented, and you get the ball to them in space. And obviously, Tyler Warren was arguably the best tight end in the country this year. So obviously, Tyler Warren was like their receiving threat. He was the top receiver for them, and justifiably so. But you cannot complete just 102 passes to wide receivers. And you're talking about including the playoffs. That was 15 games worth. What's that break down to over? What's that average? Like 6. 102 divided by 15, 7 passes a game, 7 completions. And that's including your crappy games when you play Kent State and you run up the score on them, and Bowling Green, and you play your crappy Big Ten teams that doesn't matter who's the cornerbacks on the other side of the ball. You're going to complete passes.
Right.
That is pathetic. Like that is downright pathetic.
And then you come in against Notre Dame in the biggest season of the year, and you can't complete one pass for wide receiver. And Drew Aller completed more passes to Notre Dame than he did to his own receivers.
One of the funny stats in this is Drew Aller had 0 catches for -4 yards. I don't know how it's with the lateral play or something. However, the lateral play works, but he had 0 catches for -4 yards. So technically,
that was even awful. He couldn't even complete the lateral to a receiver.
The receivers had more receiving yards than him. Harrison Wallace actually had -3, but Amari Evans had 0 catches for 0 yards. So he had more receiving yards than Drew Aller.
Let's talk about what Notre Dame did well, and specifically Jeremiah Love. And we talked about it a little bit with Shehan later on, but Jeremiah Love earned the country's respect. And guys, I think Marcus Freeman is doing something that I never thought would be possible. I think he's making Notre Dame likable. I think I don't hate Notre Dame as much as I used to.
I really don't like Riley Leonard that much. He kind of got like I don't know. I just don't like. Not
Riley Leonard. Marcus Freeman is what I meant. Marcus Freeman.
Oh, I like Marcus Freeman a lot. I think Marcus Freeman is a great coach.
Notre Dame. This is scary. This is scary territory.
Depending what happens at the quarterback position over the next 3 years, I think Notre Dame could win a national championship by 2030. I think the quarterback position is going to be incredibly important for him because you saw he brought in Sam Hartman. He brought in Riley Leonard. He's going to use his own guy next year. Probably it's going to be either Steve Angeli or maybe CJ Carr. That's another one that was thrown out there.
The Italian, maybe.
Lloyd Carr's grandson or nephew. I forget his relation, but he is directly related to Lloyd Carr, and he went to Notre Dame.
So if they want to beat Ohio State, they should probably play him.
There you go. But Jeremiah Love, obviously great. They opened up the pass game in this, and they hit Mitchell Evans early. And I think them hitting Mitchell Evans sucked guys in a little bit more to the middle, understanding that, you can't let Mitchell Evans be open every time because he's hard to guard. He's not Tyler Warren, but Mitchell Evans is a really good tight end. He is one that garners a lot of respect. And you've got to give him attention. He's not just another blocking tight end. Notre Dame has a history of really good tight ends. They've got a history of putting guys in the NFL. The previous one was Michael Mayer. He's playing, for the Raiders right now. Mitchell Evans is going to play in the NFL as well. Obviously, the offensive play of the game is Jaden Greathouse putting Cam Miller on skates. Cam Miller actually entered the transfer portal.
Yeah, I think that play put him in the transfer portal.
He just slipped into the portal. He fell over, slipped, and entered the portal.
Yeah.
Did you know that this was the first game this year that Notre Dame had a receiver with over 100 yards receiving?
That's absurd. I mean, how many catches did he even have?
7 catches, 105.
That's not too shabby.
1 for 54.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how Penn State. I don't understand how Notre Dame has done anything in this playoff. I have picked against them. So all you Notre Dame fans, you're going to be really excited when you listen to them. I have picked against them every single round of this playoff, and they just keep finding a way. So, I mean, it seemed like Penn State had all the momentum in the first half. Like they were about to go and crush them. And they
were running the ball at will up the middle.
Yeah. And Andy Kotelnicki has been notorious for doing this year where there's something's working and then he just abandons it. And it's confusing. I mean, you go back to the Boise State game and he starts running trick plays. You're like, dude, what are you doing? Just run the football. Like you don't have to be cute. And it's a little confusing when you got a guy you got two guys and Katron Allen and Nick Singleton who would be the stud anywhere, and you've got two of them. So I was really confused by it's like they didn't want to win.
Notre Dame's secondary did a really good job, trying to contain. The interior struggled immensely. Katron Allen averaged 4.3 yards carry. Nick Singleton averaged 5.6 yards per carry. Nick Singleton scored 3 times. They finished with 204 yards rushing, averaging 5 yards a carry. But when you go and look at it, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen combined to only run the ball 13 times in the second half for 51 yards.
That's awful.
They ran just 26 plays in the second half on 7 drives. They ran 40 plays on 4 drives in the first half. So they weren't sustaining drives in the second half. They had 5 drives of 4 plays or less. All of those resulted in either punt or turnover. They had 1 drive of more than 6 plays. That's not good. You have to have sustained drives to have success. They were not able to have that sustained drive in the second half. Notre Dame and Penn State each ran the ball 42 times. Notre Dame ran for about 110. I think it was like 116. Penn State ran for over 200 yards. Run the ball. That's how you sustain your drives. That's how you sustain your drives. Not putting it on the shoulders of your quarterback who, before the final drive, had nearly thrown 2 interceptions. If it wasn't for the first holding call was pretty bad. The second one was a little bit more ticky-tacky when, I'll be honest, you're throwing into 3 guys, you kind of deserve to throw an interception.
Yeah.
It's throwing into triple coverage that you're hoping to God Tyler Warren can make a play, but I'm sorry, even he is human. And it was an underthrown, floated ball. It just didn't feel like Drew Aller had a lot of zip on his balls on Thursday night.
No.
It felt like it just floated, and there was reasons why that play that ended up being a penalty. It's like the DB almost didn't realize that the ball took that long to get there.
He played scared. I mean, if we're being honest with you, he played scared, and it caused him to make bad decisions. Like, there was times where I thought Drew Aller could have ran and he didn't. He had that one really good run in the second half that I thought was going to swing the momentum in their way, but it didn't. But the interception that he ended up throwing to seal the game was just that's one of the worst decisions. And he said he was trying to throw it at the guy's feet. Man,
you don't give the field that way.
Yeah, you sling that thing way off the field as far as you
have to understand where you are in this game, that you cannot make a mistake. Like, you can throw it away and take overtime, because I think if it goes to overtime, I think Penn State wins this game easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think you could see Notre Dame was losing gas. They couldn't do anything offensively, so it was just like it came down to Penn State just screwing it up for themselves.
One thing Drew Aller, I think, really needs to work on is his decision-making and being decisive. And not – it almost feels like times he's being too indecisive. I think right back to the SMU game, very first drive, Katron Allen goes out in the flat, and he keeps looking downfield, and Katron Allen doesn't have anybody within 15 yards of him, but he has a first down. Instead, he waits, looks around, and finally realizes, and by the time he throws it to Katron Allen, it's a terrible throw, and Katron Allen doesn't catch it. I think it to his feet or something. So he needs to be more decisive. His receivers were not getting separation. I will say that. No. His receivers were not good. You go back to the Boise State game.
In the transfer portal right now. I wouldn't doubt if James Franklin showed him the door.
Yeah. You go back to the Boise State game, multiple of the receivers drop passes. There was a dime in the end zone. So there's a part of me that wonders, does he trust his guys to make the plays? And also, are they open? Because if they're not wide open, are they going to make a play? Like, do I have a guy that I'm like, if it's 50-50, is he going to make the play? Or does it got to be 80-20?
Yeah.
Like Tyler Warren's 50-50. But if it's not 80-20 to Amari Evans or Harrison Wallace, like, are they going to catch it? So I'm wondering if there was a part where he's just like, I don't trust these guys to make a play. And if Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and, Tyler Warren aren't open, that like, I'm just not comfortable throwing it to them.
Yeah. And like, on the other side of this, I don't think, just like the Georgia game, I don't think Notre Dame did anything crazy to win this game. I think Riley Leonard has the most heart. Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love have the most heart on the planet. I mean, some of the plays they made were just phenomenal, like gritty. Love watching them play. But Notre Dame's defense, I know they gave up 24 to Penn State. Hats off to them to just making plays when you had to make plays. And Riley Leonard was able to throw for 200 yards. Now, 54 of it came from Jaden Greathouse. He also threw 2 interceptions that were really bad.
But it's the little things, like you said. So he gets pulled out for a potential concussion. The ref pulls Riley Leonard out of the game, wants him checked for a concussion, basically. Stephen Jelly comes in, leads them down the field, but they probably don't quite get there if the opening kick, isn't taken. I thought he took a decent way back. Never mind. I may have looked at the wrong thing. I was looking at the wrong thing. But anyways, they go 52 yards down the field to kick a field goal. But Jelly looked pretty good throwing the ball.
And that opened up. And then once they saw, hey, this is working, this quick game's working, let's do that when Riley Leonard comes in.
It wasn't in the game plan defensively for Penn State, thinking that, hey, here's a gunslinger who's going to come in here and be able to sling it around a little bit. We're expecting Riley Leonard to hold the ball and try to find the right matchup and potentially run. And Jelly's first reaction is to throw.
Yeah, and I thought he did a really good job.
Very underrated drive, because if he doesn't kick a field goal there, Penn State is up 10-0 at halftime. But Notre Dame won the middle of 8 right there, because they kicked a field goal and then they go right down the field, score a touchdown, tie it up on their first drive of the second half.
Yeah. Notre Dame is the epitome of just being able to find a way. They are freaking trash panda raccoons who will fight, claw, scratch their way. They don't care how they get to the food. They don't care what the food is. They're going to freaking get it. And
by no way is it pretty. Like Jeremiah Love, he had that touchdown, but Jeremiah Love was 11 carries, 46 yards. Yeah, 4 yards a carry, long of 9 yards. Yeah, never broke anything. And
he's playing on one leg, so let's give him that. But like the play where he scored the touchdown, it was a phenomenal play. Was terrible. It should have been a tackle for loss. It took everything out of him to make that play. So, man, I don't understand how Notre Dame won that game. Honestly, it feels like Penn State gave it away. It feels like Penn State got out-coached.
Yes. It feels like by no means should Penn State have played for overtime, but I think there should have been a little bit of a different approach to get to overtime. Understanding that, look, we don't want to play for overtime, but we need to be smart about this. We can't come out here uber aggressive, understanding what you've got, unless you think that suddenly Harrison Wallace or Amari Evans are going to suddenly become the guy. And shockingly, they didn't.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Let's talk about the Cotton Bowl. Ohio State beats Texas 28-14. Another kind of a weird game.
Yeah.
Ohio State is up 14-7 at half, but in the weirdest way possible. Ohio State scores on the first drive, but then they go 8 straight possessions between 2 of them with punting.
Yeah.
It was 7-0 when you hit the 2-minute mark left in the first half. Texas scores. Ohio State runs a 1-play, 75-yard screen pass to Travion Henderson that Chris Fowler calls and says, look out, he's electric. He can get loose. And there he goes.
And he got loose. The bugaboo was penalties. They kept getting stupid penalties to the point where Travion Henderson had an unsportsmanlike conduct for hitting someone in the face. Like, where has that guy been?
Yeah, they were shooting themselves in the foot. I pulled some of their drives, and they went 3 of 10 on third down. But here are some of the long situations they had. They had 3rd and 26, 2nd and 20, 3rd and 18, 4th and 17, 3rd and 15.
Anyone cut it.
So it's so hard to convert and so hard to run your own game plan if you're sitting well behind the sticks.
Yeah, and you talked about Drew Aller, and his biggest issue was decisiveness, right? On the flip side, the thing that Will Howard does best is being decisive. And it could be the same thing you talked about. Well, Drew Aller might not trust his receivers. Will Howard has no choice but to trust his receivers. And some of the throws and some of the windows he was throwing into were NFL windows. And he was making NFL throws. And I was very, very impressed. And I can live with the pick that Will Howard threw.
Cool. I thought it was a little forced coming out. It seemed like they were saying, we're going to try to get this ball to Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
And it just felt a little bit forced in that situation, because if you go down and you score a touchdown there, all the pressure is on Texas there.
Absolutely.
So it felt a little forced in that situation. Not that they should have played cautious, but understanding that, look, Jeremiah Smith's going to be double covered. Almost certainly going to be in double coverage. There's going to be 2 guys, if not more, on him all night. Carnell Tate has 7 catches. G. Scott has multiple catches. Emeka Ibuka has multiple catches.
The reason I liked it, though, is because you didn't see him tuck his tail between his legs because he was struggling. Yeah. And he's like, I can't get the ball down the field right now. Let's just go to the best guy and see what happens. Yeah, it was obvious. I think everyone and their mom knew the ball was about to go to Jeremiah Smith, and just didn't work out. But Will Howard just shows back up and just keeps on playing football. The one bad thing I saw him do, how in the hell do you fall down on that 4th and 2? Man, you end up scoring on that drive, thank God. But Lord have mercy, man, you could have walked in the end zone, and that monster got him.
My wife made a point. She goes, "Well, they scored anyways," and this was after the game was over, and we were talking about that. She's like, "Well, they scored anyways," and I said, "Well, let's go back and let's look at this one of the final drives of the game. Texas gets the ball at the 1-yard line. You always assume that, okay, you get to the 1-yard line, you're going to score. Okay, well, in the very first play, they lose a yard. They try to run at the middle, and the defensive line gets pushed, and they lose a yard. Second play, they run a toss, which to me is still a weird play to run to the short side of the field. Caleb Downs busts it up. Third play, I'm pretty sure the ball got tipped to the line because it fluttered and came up well short of the corner. It looked like it got tipped. I saw there were Texas fans who won PI, but if the ball gets tipped, there's no pass interference.
Yeah, it was tipped.
And then the fourth play is the magical moment for Jack Sawyer. Comes around the edge, strip sacks. Quinn Ewers runs 82 yards back to the house. That same thing. Will Howard falls down. You're at the 15-yard line. There's no guarantee you're scoring with how good Texas' defense is.
I got 2 things that I think are pretty cool. Speaking of how good that Texas defense is, Will Howard was able to throw for 289 yards, I believe. Didn't have one 100-yard receiver. So that means he was distributing the ball to, just everybody except for Jeremiah Smith, apparently.
Carnell Tate drops a touchdown. Uncharacteristic.
Oh, my God.
Drops the ball. And he couldn't have been more open. It couldn't hit him in a better spot. It's almost like he's surprised it was that perfect.
You scored on that drive as well. I think Quinshad Junkins ran it in.
Jenkins ran it in from about 8 or 9 yards out and just bullied his way into the end zone.
But let's go back. Let's go back to the Penn State Notre Dame game when Nick Singleton drops that touchdown pass. They ended up having to kick a field goal, did they not?
Yeah, they did. That's the difference maker right there.
That's a huge swing of events. Honestly, I kid you not, when Texas had the ball on the 1-yard line, I was like, this is where Ohio State bows up. This is not where you want them right now. I looked at my wife. I said that they've been in this situation so many times and come out of it unscathed this year. And sure enough, they did it again. And I think Clemson fans can all share this sentiment, and seeing a toss play on a short down situation. I get PTSD watching that toss play. And Sark, you got the heavy package in. You've got some running backs that were moving the ball pretty well. Run the ball up the middle freaking 4 times. If you can't get 1 yard running the ball up the middle 4 times, my offense line, you say it. If we can't get 1 damn yard, we don't deserve to win. That's the truth. If you can't get 1 yard on the goal line, you don't deserve to win. You don't freaking get cued out there and toss it out. Give me a break. Especially when you're going against Caleb Downs, one of the best freaking players in the country. Run it up the middle. Run it up the middle. Run it up the middle. And if that doesn't work, run it up the middle.
One thing for Texas's offense, so Jaden Blue finishes as the leading receiver, 5 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. Matthew Golden gets hurt early in this game, makes a big catch early and makes a big catch late, but was really missing from the middle of that. And I think that really hurt the offense because Ryan Wingo is a very talented freshman, but doesn't have the experience yet. Isaiah Bond makes a weird jump and drops the ball. It was a little bit behind, but I don't understand the jump. I went back and watched it again, and it felt weird. I saw somebody say when you press the aggressive catch instead of the possession catch. I was like, yeah, we've all been there before. Gunnar Helm had 2 catches, 42 yards, but the running backs were the key part there. They combined for 11 catches and over 100 yards. They couldn't push the ball downfield, kind of what we've talked about with Penn State. The receivers, they just weren't really existing for Texas. Ohio State locked them up. Denzel Burke doesn't play in the second half. Davison Igbinosun gets a couple calls. But Ohio State's defense, like they've been all year, it's bend, don't break. Bend, don't break.
And that's the Jim Knowles way. He's going to let you move around the 20s. Once you get inside those 20s, you better kick a field goal. And especially with the Dogs, they just have so many guys. They have so many war daddies. And that defensive line is just terrifying.
They're eating right now. The defensive line right now has 16 sacks in the last 3 games.
And you know what? The difference between Ohio State and Penn State, if Ohio State runs for 200 yards against you, you've been blown out. Yes. Penn State, they ran for 200 yards and lost. And again, Penn State's defense played phenomenally. So you go over to Texas against arguably the best defense in the country, them and Ohio State. The 4 best defenses, I think, made it to the Final Four. Would you agree?
Yes, I think those are probably the 4 best defenses. I'm trying to think.
Georgia maybe could slip in there.
Georgia, you could make a case for. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else really that you could definitely justify. Oregon's defense was not a top 5 defense. They won more with offense and just enough on defense. Their defensive line was good, but their secondary was not. We saw it get exposed.
Georgia, I think, is the only one I think you can put in there. That I would put in there. Excuse me.
Ole Miss had a sneaky good defense this year.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call them top 4. If they were really top 4, they would have made the playoff and not lost to Kentucky.
Don't say that to Lane Kiffin. But Ohio State, we talk about Jeremiah Smith only having 3 catches. We talk about this later. I think G. Scott is going to be an X factor. I think he's been an X factor this entire postseason. Almost every game except for the Tennessee game, he started off. So against Oregon and against Texas, he started off with a really good play. And I think he's coming alive at the right time. People don't have a lot of film on him as a pass catcher at this point. And they're able to use him very effectively. I don't know how you're supposed to cover him when you also have to worry about Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Emeka Egbuka. Of course the tight end is going to be wide open. Honestly, this might be a bad thing to say, but I'm going to say it, Jake. This receiving core, this offense, minus the quarterback, reminds me of 2019 LSU with the amount of NFL guys that are weapons. Quinshon Judkins is going to be in the league. Travion Henderson is going to be in the league. G. Scott is going to get some time in the league. Emeka Egbuka is going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick. Carnell Tate is going to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Jeremiah Smith is going to be a top 10 pick. You've got NFL talent littered across that offense.
You're not wrong.
And Notre Dame hasn't seen that yet this offseason. The Georgia offense this postseason, the Georgia offense they faced was butt cheeks.
Notre Dame hasn't faced an offense of this capability since
Louisville.
I don't even know if you'd call Louisville. Maybe USC, at least on the offensive side of the ball, that can be similar. Quentin Joyner, you've got Deuce Robinson, Zachariah Branch, Kyle Ford. You had guys that are going to play in the league on the offensive side of the ball. So I think that might be the closest one to resemble. Obviously, Jaden Maeva is fine. Quentin Joyner is fine. They had Woody Marks. But for the most part, all these guys either transferred or went to the NFL. So we'll see what it is. I think USC is the closest resemblance of style offense when you want to talk about it, though.
Yeah, and Will Howard, I think, is better than Miller Moss.
Well, that was Jaden Maeva. Miller Moss had been benched by then.
You're right. I don't know, so you look at Indiana, and Indiana had gaps. Curtis Rourke's hurt, comes out, he has a torn ACL, his thumb's jacked up. Then they go to Georgia. They have the backup quarterback. They can't move the ball. Now, again, that's a lot of that has to do with Notre Dame playing good defense. So I don't want to take away from Notre Dame. Then they played Penn State, who has a more competent offense and a healthy offense than the other 2 teams. And they're able to run the ball up and down the field on them. Ohio State is going to capitalize on that. they're going to capitalize on that. And you'll hear me talk about it later with Shehan. I don't think Notre Dame is going to have the dogs to stick with Ohio State. And I know we're talking Ohio State, Texas right now, and I got a little derailed. But to come back to that game, sorry, Bill Norton for Texas, the defensive tackle, is a freaking stud because Ohio State couldn't get anything going up the middle. And Bill Norton, I cannot tell you how many times I saw him. I was like, what a name for a defensive tackle in college. Bill Norton. Bill Norton sounds like he drives an old rusty Ford pickup truck.
Bill Norton's from Memphis, Tennessee. That makes all the sense in the world.
It does. It does. He definitely wears cowboy boots. He definitely spits chewing tobacco. He definitely has a CB radio. Like, this dude belongs in Texas. He belongs in Texas. And he can flat out freaking play. And so that was my biggest worry is, man, I don't even know. I just lost my train of thought because I'm just thinking about this Bill Norton cat. That dude's so much fun to watch.
I will say from here, Sonny Styles and Cody Simon had their work cut out for them because the receiver, or the running backs in space, Sonny Styles has been laying the wood, and Lathan Ransom has been knocking guys out legally. 3 straight games, Lathan Ransom has hit somebody and they've been knocked out of the game.
Really?
He hit Dylan Sampson, and also he broke Nico's helmet. Jordan James from Oregon, and then he's the one who hit Arch Manning, and then Arch Manning might have been concussed. Yeah,
that was bad.
So
was that a fumble?
I think it was
called on the field. If it was called on the field, a fumble, I think.
Yeah, it was really, really close. Like, it's hard to say. Here's another question I have. I don't know the answer to this, and I'm more than happy to hear the answer. Why is it when the ball is still touching your hand-ish, you're down when it's a fumble, but when your hand's still touching the ball and your knee's down in a pass, it's out?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Because Quinn Ewers had that pass. It was like a weird shovel pass.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. He still had the ball in his hand. Technically, the ball's still touching his hand, but like, is it because he doesn't have control of it? I just need clarification. I don't
think the ball was in his hand. I think
he was still touching it. He was still touching the ball. Yeah, he was still touching the ball when his knee hit the ground, but it wasn't like he had grip. The ball's clearly like moving out of his hand. It's like he's definitely on the way out.
I would need an explanation on that because that doesn't make any sense. Because with that same logic, Arch Manning fumbled.
And I think the call stands. I think it's way too close. It's hard to tell when that stuff. So I fully get it. But that does it for recap. We've got Shehan Jeyarajah coming up. Can't wait. He gives us a lot of great insight. Talks a lot about the Texas game, Texas Ohio State, because he was there covering it, and gives us great insight on what he thinks, as well as what we think is going to happen in the national championship game. So stay tuned for that. Be right next. All right. We have Shehan Jeyarajah with us here to preview Notre Dame and Ohio State playing the national championship game. Really appreciate you taking the time and coming back. I felt it was appropriate to bring you back. Yeah. You were here when we did the Big Ten East-ish. So it was Ohio State, and while Notre Dame isn't a Big Ten team, they have the culture similar of a Big Ten team. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come back to us.
Yeah, and can I humbly pat myself on the back real quick? During Shehan's
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
I'm not going to say anything about me calling Indiana my dark horse team while you were on. I'm not going to say that. I just wanted to say, Shehan, it's wonderful to have you here. And pat myself on the back.
Well, thanks so much for having me back. Yeah, I looked at the schedule and I was like, hey, there's something there. And I thought that meant like, cool, 8 wins. Nice. Fun times. But this is one of the weird things about this season in general is that, because obviously I'm known for having a Big 12 background. And it's like, so many of these teams that you thought were going to be pretty good ended up just being terrible. And it completely skewed and like flipped what hard games actually were. So you see like Indiana go into a Michigan game where they're huge favorites. Like it was such a crazy year for that, but because of that, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. If we're being honest, 8-4 is what I thought, but I'm not going to say that out loud.
My favorite stat was Indiana before the season has never had a 10-win season. Indiana still does not have a 10-win season because they won 11 this year. So it was before they were getting there. It's like they might win 10. They might win 10. And now it's the stat of, well, they've still never won 10. They won 11. But coincidentally, Indiana played both of these teams this year. They were kind of both blowouts at one point. I mean, Ohio State kind of pulled away. Same thing. Notre Dame was up big heading into the fourth quarter. Is there something that we can take away from Indiana playing both these teams when you look at them? Say, like, how is this matchup? Because it's not like Ohio State played Indiana week 3. Like, it was a November game.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And, I think that the short answer is probably we can't take too much away from it because, I looked back at that game a little bit, actually. It's funny that you mentioned. And, that was one of the first games where Ohio State was trying to figure out their lines a little bit. They had just lost Josh Simmons to a season-ending injury, their left tackle. I think it was before they lost Seth McLaughlin, their center, but they were shuffling. And I think that Indiana was able to take advantage of it more than people realize. Like, when you look back at that game, the score looks terrible for obvious reasons because their offense just got obliterated. But defensively, Indiana hung around for a little bit. And
they didn't get out-talented.
No. And even, you look at that. I think that you even look at that Notre Dame game. They hung pretty well on defense too. It really was just their offense had no chance when they went against literally. Right now, the number 1 and number 2 team in the country, right? That's the level that we're talking about. And so, I don't know exactly how much you can take away from it necessarily. I think that from my perspective, I look at both these teams. I'm like, I think that the right team probably can get a little bit of pressure on both of these quarterbacks, can cause some issues for both of these offensive lines, especially when you talk about the injuries that both are dealing with. But other than that, I don't know. It would be fascinating to go back and watch both of them now, but I don't know that you can take too much away.
Yeah.
I just pulled up. Indiana actually held Jeremiah Smith to only 3 catches for 34 yards. Not saying that that's going to happen again. Obviously, he was just held to 1 catch, 3 yards last week. But, I think there's, like Will said, not necessarily out-talented. Indiana's defense, held up in both those games. It's just Kurt Cignetti's offense kind of got soft in both of them,
you saw the picture that went viral of Curtis Rourke's thumb. And he hurt that thumb.
He also didn't have an ACL this year.
Yeah,
which is wild.
That crazy.
Just made me. I love that.
I put out a tweet earlier this year. I'm like, I feel like one of the cool things about this season and also the expanded playoff is that we're just getting so many urban legend type stories right now, right? You get or sort of tall tales with Travis Hunter and with Curtis Rourke with no ACL and a broken hand, and Will Howard with this giant it's been a lot of fun to kind of see all these just again folk heroes essentially kind of pop up.
Jack Sawyer, Captain Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, Captain Jack Sawyer.
Has your heart started to calm down a little bit since that play?
Well, what's funny is when that play happened, because I was in the building for it, I was waiting for it to be blown dead. I think that even everybody was kind of looking around is this real? He was probably throwing forward, right? This didn't happen, did it? But it never got blown dead. You look at the replay, it's oh, that was a fumble. It was just one of the craziest things. And because I think that everybody saw it happen in real time too. And our first thought was just, oh, they didn't get the conversion. We didn't realize just how bad it was going to get. But I'll tell you what, I said heading into the playoff, I really needed to see Ohio State have a defensive player pop up and prove themselves. And, the lazy comparison is the lazy comparison that you kind of make is Joey Bosa during their 2014 title run, right? Where he kind of pops and he turns into a first round pick type player. And I was waiting to see which player that was going to be. And it's been Jack Sawyer, 4.5 sacks in 3 games. Obviously that 80+ yard touchdown, he has just been incredible. And this is, again, I keep mentioning it. This is one of the cool things about the playoff, but if this expanded playoff doesn't happen, Jack Sawyer is not an Ohio State legend. And no matter what happens on Monday, he's going to be.
Yeah, which is crazy because he made the play in the Michigan game, right? That was supposed to cement his legacy, get the monkey off his back, and then it doesn't happen. And then finally he gets to do it in probably the slowest scoop and score I've ever seen in my entire life. But What's crazy?
I saw it was like 11 seconds or something like that. It took forever.
And what's great, that's the 5th time that a team has been inside the 5 and not scored a single point against Ohio State. So five plays inside the 5 with Oregon, Nebraska, Texas. Who's the other one? Tennessee, maybe? No. Who was the other one, Jake?
Michigan, Oregon, Indiana.
Indiana
Texas,
was the other one. Yeah.
And whichever one you said.
So 5 times inside the 5, and Ohio State scored more points than all those guys combined. That is
Penn
insane.
State, there was 2 of them, actually.
You're right. So it's actually absolutely absurd. And then coming into this playoff, my biggest question mark on Texas was not only the offense, but the red zone offense. Their red zone offense has been just abysmal all year long. And you saw that. I guess we're previewing a little bit from the last game, but like coming into this game, does that Ohio State red zone defense give you confidence against what seems to be like an offense they haven't faced yet with Notre Dame that relies so heavily on the run? I mean, not to be that guy, Jake, but the only offense I can really equate them to is Michigan. That they're a power offense. They really want to just bruise you up, and then they want to dink and dunk you, and get their guys in space. But I mean, Shehan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that from my perspective, like Notre Dame is uniquely positioned for the red zone because of their running quarterback, right? Like I think that you saw in some of these short yardage situations. And by the way, the one time that we saw Arch Manning for Texas was on a 4th and 2, and he broke through and they ran a speed option with him and he got a first down. So like
might have been a fumble.
Yeah, and it was close. It was close. It looked to me like it wasn't
the stands. You got to give it stands, but it was way closer than what it looked like.
It was definitely closer. But
if Ohio State fans threw bottles on the field, would they have overturned it?
We were not with that one. I can't remember which play it was, but there was a call that went against Texas, and everybody in the press box was looking at each other like, well, it was Texas fans. That was the ones who did it. but I think that if you're Ohio State, yeah, I do trust their red zone defense a lot, but I think you've really got to win within the 20s. Like I think you've really got to limit them, because this is not a Notre Dame offense that effectively takes advantage of space. That's not really what they're built to do. Riley Leonard has just not been a consistent enough passer this year. I feel a little bit, and obviously all of us have watched Riley Leonard for multiple years now. I feel like that shoulder never recovered quite right. Like he is just not throwing the ball downfield with any level of accuracy, but it hasn't mattered because of how effective he's been in the quarterback run game and also to an extent in the intermediate passing game as well. Right. So, I mean, from my perspective, like Notre Dame is a team that's fully built to take advantage of the red zone. I think Ohio State's going to have success there, but like, I think that the way that you try and prevent it is you just don't let them get there in the first place. I think that if you're down in the 10s, to me, Notre Dame is not a team that you're going to stop within the 10.
And then on the flip side, Ohio State, I think, has struggled the most when they can't run the football. And Notre Dame, I feel like that's what they do best. It's like Jake and Shehan, like, how do y'all see Ohio State getting this run game going against one of the best defenses in this play? I think the 2 best defenses are left. I mean, and we've seen that throughout the playoff. I mean, Texas probably is up there in top 2, top 3. But how do you think you get the run game going against a team like this?
Well, the one thing I was going to say about Notre Dame, especially their offense, is they don't have the explosion that some of these other offenses did. Right. We saw Jeremiah Love go for 98 yards in the first game against Indiana, but against Georgia, they really didn't have many long drives. I mean, they scored, 17 points in the matter of 4 minutes or something like that, when it was field goal, a fumble, and then return kick. I mean, they nearly put the game away in the middle 8. Against Penn State, I mean, they had multiple drives of 10 plays or longer. They weren't, hitting. I mean, they had the one to Great House because Cam Miller fell down and then the safety took an awful angle at him, but it wasn't like this massive explosive play that the receiver did absolutely everything. Cam Miller literally fell on his ass backing up, and then the safety just got
the sniper got him. You got to watch out for those.
Yeah. Turf Monster got him pretty bad, but I don't think that they're going to have as much success to be able to find that kind of stuff, because I think Ohio State's secondary is better than Penn State's secondary. I think that Ohio State, when you have guys like Caleb Downs in your defense. But when you talk about Ohio State's running game, Penn State was gashing Notre Dame. They were gashing. Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton were absolutely running all over them. They did not run the ball much in the second half. I don't know why. They it seemed like they were going away from the run and they were running some different things. But Penn State's obviously got a pretty good running back duo. Ohio State also has a very good running back duo. I think Ohio State, what we've seen the last couple times, is they're not relying as much on in between the tackles. They're trying to get outside the tackle. They're trying to get guys in space. Travion Henderson had a really good run on the outside where Will Howard turned around, handed him off, and he went to the edge. We saw Travion Henderson get involved in the screen pass where he went for 75 yards. I think their goal is to try to find a way to get those guys in space compared to forcing them to beat the linebackers, basically.
Well, and the thing is, though, that's interesting heading into this one, because over the past couple of games, I mean, it's been Travion Henderson has really been the guy that they've leaned on. And, I got a chance to talk to Chip Kelly last week, and he was kind of like, look, the fact that we brought in Quinshon means that Travion's the freshest back in the country right now. Like, he just hasn't had a lot of workload. But I actually think that this is the game where you need to unleash Quinshon Judkins, because you mentioned it. You saw with Kaytron Allen, especially in that game, like, they were able to go right at this Notre Dame defense. And, one thing I want to emphasize, and one reason that I'm a little concerned about Notre Dame, is like the amount of line talent that they've lost to injury over the course of the season is just unbelievable. Obviously,
losing Riley Mills, in
the first game against Indiana, Riley Mills goes out earlier this season. They lose Boubacar Traore to injury earlier this season. They lose Jordan Botello. Those are three guys who would have been starters or played a lot of snaps for them. Howard Cross has been banged up as well across the season. So this is
flip on the other side. They just lost Knapp, the left tackle.
Yes. If we even want to get into the offensive side of things, I mean, obviously Charles Jagusa was supposed to be a player who was going to start at left tackle. He actually made his first snaps of the season playing backup right guard. So he might factor into the left tackle rotation, but
he was listed as the or on the depth chart this week already.
Yeah. Well, and they also lost their center Ashton Craig earlier this season as well. So they've lost 3 or 4 guys on both sides over the course of the season. And you mentioned it for Penn State, who to me has a quality offensive line, but I think that I'd probably give a slight edge to Ohio State. They were pushing them around. They were pushing Notre Dame around with relative consistency. This is the game where I think you have to go right at them. You have to run on the interior. You have to prove that you can go between the tackles. And the other thing too, and this is obviously a little bigger picture, is a big part of this game, because if you look at Notre Dame's defense statistically, they're really good against the run, but they're best in the country level against the pass. They do it a little differently than Texas does, who's kind of like that other best against the pass team, right? Texas is much more of a zone team. Notre Dame, much more of a man team. I don't think you can run man against this Ohio State wide receiving core, so it's going to be interesting to see how they compensate for that. I expect that, Xavier Watts has been a player at safety who they've used in run defense. I don't think you can do that against this team. And so that's even more reason why, if they clear at all the box, you got to go at them. You got to be willing to attack them. You got to go be willing to go right at them. Again, and some of this is going to be dependent on who do you feel best about if you're Ohio State, because they lost their starting left tackle and they lost their starting center. They've moved their left guard, Donovan Jackson, out to left tackle. So it kind of is where do you feel like you can find the most space? Maybe you're just running away from Howard Cross is the answer to it. But I think you have to go between the tackles, because I think you can have success there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if we're going to flip, because if we're being honest, I'm not going to get there yet. So if Notre Dame wants to move the football, I think the biggest X factor on their offense has to be Jordan Faison. And I think you have seen his emergence, especially later in the season, and how they've gotten that passing game going. Because, like you said, the intermediate passing game seems to be all Riley Leonard's able to get done. And this guy has come out as one of those athletic slot guys that I hadn't even heard of coming into this year. And I mean, not that Notre Dame has some world beaters at wide receiver, but if you're going to make Ohio State respect the passing game, a guy like Faison has to be active early and often. We haven't seen much out of Mitchell Evans, the tight end. He made a couple good plays against Penn State early, but then he kind of faded. Obviously, Greathouse. You talked about Greathouse earlier, but Jaden Thomas, and then Bo Collins. Bo Collins was nowhere to be found against Penn State, but he had the big touchdown against Georgia. But Faison's been the one in every single game that's made plays. And then you talk about the folk heroes. Jeremiah Love, that touchdown run against Penn State was one of the greatest touchdowns I have ever seen. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Like,
that was
this dude should have been tackled 4 times. He's on one leg and still somehow lunges across the goal line.
He was sick, I believe, at the time too.
Hard. Sick, yeah. So everybody had the flu, and then that was
Abdul Carter whiffs on trying to punch the ball out.
Yeah, which another Hart guy, Abdul Carter. I hated that the season had to end like that for him, like someone playing with one arm. I mean, but if Notre Dame comes in crying about all the injuries, Ohio State's not the team they want to cry to when it comes to stuff like that.
No,
but I've told Jake this a lot. I think if you have a weak link on that Ohio State defense, it's the cornerbacks. I mean, and I say weak with some very big quotation marks because they're not that weak. But Igbinosun has been exposed sometimes if you can push him deep. He likes to get a little handsy. He had a couple holding calls against Texas. But Notre Dame doesn't have any guys that are going to take you over the top. So I'm very curious to see what Notre Dame is able to do to attack this Ohio State offense, our defense. And Ohio State's defense has been able to – people have been able to run on them. We talk about Nebraska back in October. They were running a lot of power and gap scheme stuff, and they were able to move the ball pretty well in the running game. But I don't know what to take into that when now we're in freaking January. So they're not the same team.
Jack Sawyer is different now than he was in October.
But JTT hurts his ankle. Is he the same person? Yeah. Like what JT? I don't think did we see him much after that injury?
He came back. He had a tackle for loss on the second play of the second half, actually. So he did come back, but obviously, look, at this point in the season, like everybody's a little banged up, right? Yeah. Everybody's hurt. Everybody's banged up. I think that if you're Notre Dame, you want to lean into that, right? You want to attack right away. You mentioned obviously, kind of trying to find the weak link on this Ohio State defense, and it's really hard. There are not very many weak links. You mentioned it. I would say that I think that Ohio State and Texas are the 2 best defenses in the country this year, and Notre Dame is like at worst maybe 4th. Like right. we are talking about the very best of the very best defenses in college football right now. And I think again, when I talk about my concerns for Notre Dame, it's that I mean, if Ohio State's defense, and I got to cover Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, quite a bit when he was in the Big 12 at Oklahoma State. They run a 3 safety look a lot of the time, but obviously that third safety, they're willing to move around. They're Caleb Downs has kind of been that player in a lot of cases for Ohio State's defense, and he is. Yeah, he's as good as anybody. Like, I mean, to run a 3 safety look and one of those safeties be Caleb Downs is like, that should be outlawed. They shouldn't. It should be like whenever Kareem wasn't allowed to dunk, they shouldn't be allowed to use Caleb Downs. But I think that like that's probably my biggest thing is if the game is in front of them, like if Ohio State's defense never like has to look back, I just don't love that. I just don't. And again, I think that. Like if you're Notre Dame, like you probably have to run Riley Leonard 20 times in this game. Like you probably need to run the ball on, 70% of your possessions. But like, I mean, if you're Mike Denbrock, their offensive coordinator, like I feel like you take an early shot. I think that you just try to put Jaden Greathouse on an island on Igbinosun and just try to see what happens. See if you can get that PI. You don't even have to complete the pass necessarily. It just changes the way that you have to cover them. Because if this thing is played in a phone booth, like, and Notre Dame has made it to the national championship game playing in a phone booth, so I don't want to slight them too much. But like, this is a different kind of challenge when you're talking about Ohio State's defense.
I think one of the areas they might be able to expose, we saw Texas do this a little bit, was in the linebackers. Cody Simon gets hurt against Texas, came back in, played. I mean, they were working on his knee a little bit. How's his mobility going to be? And Sonny Styles was getting beat by the running backs, on those wheel routes, got beat twice. How do they attack the linebackers? Is it with Mitchell Evans? Is it with the running backs? Is it, with Jordan Love and company? How do they attack them. But the difference is, like you said, Texas has Matthew Golden. They've got Ryan Wingo, guys with speed, where that opens it up because now those safeties and cornerbacks are having to push back knowing that there's going to be a deep threat. If you know there's no deep threat, those wheel routes become a lot harder when the cornerback is standing 8 yards from the line of scrimmage, knowing that somebody's coming. So, like you said, taking a shot early is not the worst idea because they're known to get, PI calls. Denzel Burke got hurt against Texas, didn't play in the second half at all. They said he is going to be available, but what does that actually mean? Are they actually going to play, or is he just available?
When I'd say this too, Jake, in concern on how Notre Dame's going to attack that defense. Football is a copycat sport, and you best believe that Notre Dame saw that the play that worked the most effective was the wheel route out of the backfield. And how did they set that up? Well, the way they set that up was they were able to hit you on intermediate out routes, get the guys bailing out, following the wide receivers hard enough so then the running back can come out. Because it seemed like the only play that Quinn Ewers could complete against Ohio State was behind the line of scrimmage. Everything was short and then just dump it off to the running back over and over and over again. And I just don't see Riley Leonard doing that. I think he tucks it where Quinn Ewers would have thrown it. So I'm very curious to see what happens there.
And I think the fundamental question that I have, and I'm curious if you guys have any theories, is like, if you're Notre Dame's offense, just like fundamentally, how do you move the safeties? Like at all, right? Like, because you're not doing it with drop back passing. I don't know that maybe you're doing it with motion a little bit. I think that you can maybe, find something on an early swing route or something but like, I think that's probably my biggest question for Ohio's or for Notre Dame's offense is, do they have any aspect of their team that's able to move the safeties off their mark? Because you can't create counters if they're not biting at the initial.
They might just sit Caleb Downs 8 yards off the ball and say, go do whatever you want. And then we're going to see Caleb Downs just attacking the run and saying, okay, DB's got the rest.
I think what we're going to see is I would not doubt to see one of them big old hog mollies coming out there in a tight end number. I think they're going to put some more ass down in the box, and you do that over and over and over again. Well, now you're saying Ohio State, you can put another linebacker in the game. Don't run your 3 safety stuff. Or you can tell Caleb Downs to come on in here and get a little bit of piece of these big hog mollies, which he's shown he's not afraid to do and can definitely finesse and get up under those guys.
He was a guy, by the way, Kelvin Banks, the star Texas left tackle, said after the game, like on that toss play, he was just like, Downs just saw it immediately and made a play before any of us could even think. Like it happened so fast because he's so decisive.
I looked at my wife and I said, that was a film play. And Jake, the same thing happened when I was at the game for Nebraska. I mean, that guy, he knows football so well. So when he saw that formation, you already see him come up to where he's supposed to be. And he shot the exact gap that he was supposed to be in, where there's a crease. There's a small crease where the guy's pulling, and you have probably about a second, maybe half a second before that crease is closed. He's hitting it. I mean, it was unbelievable. What also helps is I don't know what linebacker it was, but another linebacker slipped the gap on the backside and was able to slow him down for Caleb Downs to murder him. So Caleb Downs got all the credit, but there was a linebacker who got him from the backside. I believe it was a linebacker. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I think it was Sonny Styles, if I remember.
I think it was Sonny Styles.
Because I think that he was the one who finished that play too.
Lathan Ransom, I believe, actually cleaned it up at the end.
Okay.
Lathan Ransom cleaned it up, but Styles pushed there was a huge push forward. Downs got in, pushed the tight end. I think it was Styles pushed the tight end back, and then Lathan Ransom ended up cleaning it up.
Let me translate that. They have too many guys on Ohio State's defense. It's not fair. We just named 3 guys who made a freaking play at the end, when it mattered most.
Yeah, and none of them were the guy. Well, Shehan, I don't want to keep you too much longer here, but I want a couple of things here. I would love to hear who you think is going to be like the key player. I mean, obviously we can talk about Will Howard or Riley Leonard, but like, is there a guy on either team that you think like, okay, it wouldn't shock me if it comes down to this guy? And you can't say Caleb Downs either.
I won't, and I think that we should ban Jeremiah Smith too as on the other side. But
who is that? I've never heard of him.
He only had 1 catch for 3 yards last year.
Well, I did point to Quinshon Judkins in this game. I think he's going to be a huge aspect of this game because I think for Ohio State, if they're able to run inside the tackles, like this game might just be over, right? This game might just be over from the start if they're able to own that inside positioning. And the other guy that I'll mention too on their offense is Carnell Tate. He had a great game last week. The thing is, right? Notre Dame, like we mentioned, is a man team. I think they're going to run a lot more zone, which, by the way, is not something that they've experienced doing. So, you kind of look for players who can take advantage of that inside stuff. Well, I do think they're going to bracket Jeremiah Smith, try to take him out of the game. It worked for Texas. It worked for Michigan in a lot of ways. I think that it's going to be Egbuka, and I think it's going to be Carnell Tate. Those are going to be the two guys who I think have to win intermediate and give themselves a chance. And look, I mean, I obviously hope it's going to be a good game. I'm worried that there isn't a guy on Notre Dame who's going to be able to really change this game. I mean, they have talented guys. The worry is, again, just you just need so many guys to do so many things right against Ohio State. And I look at that, just for example, that Texas secondary. They've got the Thorpe Award winner and Jahdae Barron back there, but then they've got an All-American and Michael Taft. They've got a guy who obviously, you're very familiar with, and Andrew Makuba, great player. Malik Muhammad, a rising star in my eyes. They just have so many guys. Jalen Gilbo's a guy who comes off the bench as a nickel. And you're talking about 5 guys who I think are going to play in the NFL on that back end.
Yeah.
And one guy who I think the loss of him makes a big difference is Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback for Notre Dame who got hurt midseason. So it's just a lot to put on this Notre Dame defense. And I don't know. So I think that's the big thing for Notre Dame is you just need units to play well together. I don't think you can rely on guys.
Right. I think the key is sustaining drives. Can Notre Dame keep their defense off the field? And if they can do that, I mean, if we could, to call it to the NFL, if you go back and watch the Commanders game against Tampa Bay, they had a 17-play drive. So how do you beat a team when your defense is weaker? Well, you don't put your defense out there. So if Notre Dame's able to move the ball and hold onto the ball and just run it and milk the clock, I think that's the only way. That's the only way they have a chance, and not turn the ball over. And man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
One thing off of your point there, Shehan, I think G. Scott is going to be another guy that fills right in there because, he didn't have a phenomenal season, but he's got 10 catches in the last 3 games combined. He's got over 100 yards. He made a couple of big plays against Texas, against Oregon. He starts off the game with a 30-yard reception. I think that's a guy that doesn't get talked about as much. He's a former wide receiver. He can run routes. He understands that. And he made the play against Texas where if he doesn't push himself to get to 4th and 2, Will Howard doesn't trip and fall at the 15-yard line when he gets a run play. So I think that's a guy that is similar to where, yes, he's not the biggest playmaker, but he's a guy who moves the sticks for them. And if Notre Dame similar gets stuck and Ohio State's running 8, 9, 10 play drives, does Notre Dame have the depth to be able to sustain? Are they going to be able to sub guys out? And how, when you have to, because that defensive line is going to rotate, what's that going to look like?
Right.
So before we let you go, Shehan, I want a score prediction. We'll give ours too. I want, even if this isn't what you end up putting out, I just want to hear approximately what you think this will be.
Yeah, so I think that it's going to look a lot like the Texas game. I think that these are 2 of the best defenses in college football. I think that offensively, right, we know what Ohio State is. We know how they're able to change games. And, and another piece too, right, is some of this is going to be incumbent on Ohio State not making mistakes. They ended drives with penalties 4 separate times in that Texas game. You can't get away with that, I don't think, against a team like Notre Dame. Again, for Notre Dame, I think that they're going to do a lot well against the pass. I'm worried about them against the run, and I'm worried if they struggle against Ohio State's inside run game, how they have to adjust and whether they're going to be able to keep up their passing defense for 4 quarters. Offensively, it just has to be holding on and slowing things up. I think that for Notre Dame to win, I think that they have to hold Ohio State under 24, probably. obviously ideally less, but I think that 24 is like the upper limit. If Ohio State gets to 24, I think it's over. And I think Ohio State's going to get to 24. So I haven't thought much about a score prediction, but I'll put out 31-17, let's call it.
I'm right there with you. Notre Dame's not going to win a track meet. They're not going to be able to run up and down the field with them. They've got to keep this low scoring. I think they've kind of got to dirty the game up a little bit, similar to, I know it's Michigan, and Michigan's not as good, and people hate hearing about that one. It's a very different team. But Michigan was able to dirty the game up. They forced Will Howard to make some mistakes, especially in crucial spots inside, their own 10-yard line. They need to find a way to be able to do that as well and keep this as low scoring as possible and take advantage when they get a chance. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I think it's going to be 27-21. I think it's going to be, close around halftime. It wouldn't shock me if there's a backdoor, touchdown or some sort of way to cover the spread there, though.
Don't listen to him, Shehan. He doesn't believe that. Shehan, he doesn't believe that. He's doing some jinx and juju right now. He does this every week. Don't trust it. I have a feeling this game is. I don't think it's going to be TCU Georgia blowout. I think it's going to be more like Michigan Washington, where Washington kind of hangs around, and then you just see the haymaker come in halfway through the third quarter. I have 31-13 as my final.
I almost
score.
Said that exactly. Actually,
yeah.
I think that's a good number.
I'm thinking Ohio State just has, like we said, they've got too many dogs. They've got too many horses in the barn, and when Ohio State played Michigan, even though Michigan was depleted, there's a little bit more on the line. And this is a rivalry game, but I think Ryan Day is about to cement himself and just stick up his two favorite fingers to all the people who've been hating on him and asking for him to lose his job. So I think this is the Ryan Day legacy game.
Yeah, the big thing that concerns me, right? And well, I've said a million things that have concerned me at this point about Notre Dame, but I mean, think back to that Georgia game. The final score is 23-10. Yes. They get an 11-yard touchdown pass that's set up by a fumble, and they have a kick return touchdown. And that's 14 points. Like, they only score field goals other than those plays. And I think that Ohio State's defense is like a lot better than Georgia's. Like, I think it's like noticeably better than Georgia's. And if that's the case, like, I'm a little concerned. So, yeah, like you said, it's not going to be Georgia TCU by any means, but this feels like one of those where we've had such an incredible playoff. We've had so many competitive games. I mean, with the Notre Dame, you had 2 games right in a row that were just fantastic, with the Georgia game followed by the Penn State game. And it feels a little bit like all right, we're running on fumes right now. We just don't. And for Ohio State, it's the flip side, right? They've played less snaps in the playoff per game than just about anybody. So I think we might just see a team that's like I compared it in our work Slack to this a little earlier. Notre Dame's a team that, despite all the injuries, has just been zombies slowly moving forward over and over again. But like Ohio State is the first team with a machine gun, and I'm just a little worried that that's going to come to fruition.
Machine Gun Jeyarajah. You heard it here first.
Dylan Stewart would be proud.
Great callback.
Well, Shehan, we really appreciate you joining us. Well, we'd love for you to let everybody know how they can find you, how all your writing, and make sure that they can definitely follow you throughout the off season, because you're one of the best in the business.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm on every social media platform, Shehan Jeyarajah, and you can read all my work over at cbssports.com. We'll obviously have a lot of content coming from the championship game. And by the way, after that, I'm taking 2 weeks off at the beginning of February, so do not call me then.
Good for you.
Absolutely. You deserve it. Well, again, we really appreciate you joining us, and we can't wait to see what the championship holds.
Thank you for having me.